Beastcurse. Once upon a time, there were 3 brothers in a kingdom. The youngest of the 3 was a lazy person who slept through his days. But the youngest brother had a cheerful demeanor, so he was liked by everyone. Even when an epidemic broke out in the country, the youngest brother merely hummed to himself while lazing about the palace. But the people in the city found healing in his cheery voice, so they praised him. That person is amazing. He really is. Even when the country was involved in war, the youngest brother merely talked about things past while lazing about the palace. But the people in the city could forget the war with his anecdotes and comforted each other. That person is wonderful, really wonderful. One day, the younger brother was lazing about the palace again, but today he could not hear the voices of the people in the city. While lazing about, the youngest brother continued thinking, idle. Why? Idle. Why? Idle. Why? But he eventually became sleepy. In a country where everyone had died from sickness and war, only snores resounded throughout the palace today. This is a happy kingdom. 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 A happy kingdom.
Captain's Holy Spear. The captain tramples upon his life. The others' screams turn into songs of joy. Their flowing tears from despair to darkness. Conflict shall call for revenge and give birth to new loneliness. Dragonlance. The king grew old. His piercing eyes lost their light, and his formidable body has suffered regression. The vanity and fear he gathered upon himself throughout the years devoured his heart in their ugliness. The king was afraid. So to prevent himself from losing the borders under his protection, he repeatedly invaded the surrounding countries. The king was afraid. He could not bring himself to trust in his people's voices or his advisors' words, so he tried to take away everything with violence and tyranny. There was one dragon that was loyal to the king. The wingless dragon followed every word that the king said. It was once saved by the king, and swore to repay his kindness with its soul. Even if they were foolish acts they can't stand to overlook, it would follow along if the king ordered it. For the dragon, the king was justice itself. One day, the dragon appeared before the king, covered in blood. Blood spilled from the young prince when he was murdered. The one who gave the order was none other than his own father, the king. The dragon pleaded with the king.
I cannot defy your commands, but I cannot follow them anymore. Kill me.
The dragon said and lowered his head tiredly. That's an old story. The story of a foolish king, his country that had come to ruin hundreds of years ago, and a wingless dragon. Even today, wind rushes through the plains. The same wind that blew on the day the king and the dragon exchanged vows.
The Devil Queen.
In a small country at about the same latitude as a province directly north of a city-state that included a town that traded with an island of a republic of a kingdom led by a queen, the queen of the small country's younger brother's male cousins, elder brother's son-in-law's adopted child's minstrel lover's beautiful queen who danced on stage when he played love-struck admirer's employer's wife's secret lover's child's wet nurse's store she commonly went to's proprietor asked, "Where do I send the throne decorated with the decorations made of the same materials as the handle of the lid of the pot of the same weight as the tableware of the same color as the weather vane of the house of the one peeping through the door reflected in the mirror of the decorative frame carved with the carving tool made of the splinters of the grindstone sharp with his kitchen knife?" Of the wife's husband's younger sister's older brother's daughter's husband's younger brother's nephew's father's mother's husband's bride's niece's friend's wife's younger sister's daughter's husband's younger brother's nephew's father's mother's husband's niece's husband's younger sister's older brother's daughter's husband's younger brother's nephew's father's mother's niece's husband's younger sister's older brother's daughter's husband's younger brother's nephew's father's.
Labyrinth's shout. That woman was unbelievably dim-witted. She was unskilled and would take 3 times as longer than the average person at doing anything. She walks slowly, talks slowly, blinks slowly, and can't even accomplish the simple task of taking water from the well. Even when called cow by the children and laughed at, she could only laugh back. That woman was unbelievably dull. Even when she fell and blood was spilled, she acted like nothing has happened. She dropped money all the time, but never tried to take them back. Even when someone badmouthed her right in front of her, it would take her at least half a day to realize what happened. When the children saw the woman, they happily threw rocks at her. That woman was unbelievably foolish. During the summer, when the village suffered from the sunlight, she disappeared somewhere by herself. All the children died from starvation. The villagers did not think about the escaping woman. After 2 days or so, rain fell upon the village and provided salvation. Yet the woman did not come back. And 20 days after the woman ceased to return, a priest came to the village. The priest held in his hand a spear with horns. The spear was sticky to grasp due to the oil. The spear was too heavy to hold and wasn't practical to use. That spear could not pierce through anything when used. The priest forcibly left the spear to the villagers, but they found it creepy and none came close to it. The spear was not used by anyone, and slumbers even now in the corner of the village. Phoenix Spear. In a country near the border, there was a warrior who did not fear death. His formidable body was so sturdy that even arrows could not seem to pierce him. Because of that, the warrior constantly threw himself in the midst of the battlefield. Once, a beautiful bird appeared in the warrior's dreams. The bird praised the brave and fierce warrior, and whispered to him that he could fulfill one of 2 wishes: end the war and make the world into a peaceful one, or for him to attain immortality. The warrior chose immortality. Ever since then, the warrior in battle became a sight to behold. He cut down enemies like grass, and no matter how many arrows had been shot at him, no matter how many swords he's been showered in, he remained perfectly fine and continued to cut open a path in the enemies. The king bestowed numerous titles and praise upon the warrior, and the warrior thought that his glorious days will continue until the ends of time. However, the war did not end, and the border country eventually came to destruction. The flames of battle expanded and wrought devastation to nearby areas. Trees and grass withered, the people died out, and eventually there was no one who knew of the warrior anymore. No matter how much he starved himself, the warrior could not die. He dreamt of the beautiful bird again. He begged to die, but the bird answered that he couldn't. It told the warrior that he could never die, no matter what. Spear of the Usurper. In a certain country, there lived a man who acted as a double for the prince. The man took care of official business every day in place of the prince. When he went to the prince after finishing a day's work, he found a naked woman sleeping in his room. The woman was the prince's sister. A man with the same face stared at the man's shocked impression and invited him to join in while laughing flippantly. The man loved the prince's sister. He also felt that she, who adored him like an older brother, loved him back. Even if he goes through every day in a facade, she was the only thing he was living for. He who put his life on the line for the most despicable prince. The prince took command during the war. He told this to the man who was prepared to risk his life to accomplish his job. If he managed to take the enemy's commander's head, then the prince would let him sleep with his sister once. The man shoved the spear through the prince's mouth as he laughed flippantly. After the war, the prince made his sister his wife and began to injure his own face and throat. He repeated his actions every time his sister called him Big Brother. Eventually, the prince was found with his face burnt and a spear impaling him in the mouth. His burnt face looked very calm. Sunrise. Long ago, in the land of the Golden Bird, there was a sword said to be made of every precious metal and inlaid with every kind of gemstone known to man. This sword was said to be so sharp, even a small cut by the edge of the blade would bleed out the entire body and could never be healed. Some way or another, this sword fell into the hands of a woman selling her body. She became compelled to hide the blade in her bedding, and upon being taken by a man, she would turn the sword on him. Before even feeling any pain, the men would completely bleed out and die, and from the wounds would flow an endless amount of gold and money. One day, bursting with wealth and dressed in the finest garments available, the woman sought to liberate the gemstones from the sword. Driven by her greed, the blade's edge turned slick and deadly as the woman sent for the blacksmith. On the way there, weighed down and unbalanced by the sword, the woman fell off the side of the bridge into the river. Her greed was such that even as she was swallowed up by the water, she refused to let go of the heavy blade. Her body was found the next day, drained of all its blood. Transcience. Those people were scarily hard-working. They tore through forests and hunted animals, though they had no need. They learned how to preserve food that they could not finish, and tried to unnecessarily save up money. However, there were none who questioned this, because everyone was doing it. Those people were scarily studious. They repeatedly did numerical calculations that had no application and predicted the future, repeating their arguments. They created numerous difficult languages, made tons of complicated machinery that they threw away right after. However, there were none who looked back, because nobody realized. Those people were scarily obedient. When the sun rose, they got up at the same time, put on the same clothes, and began their work in a stuffy room out of their own will. However, there were none who complained, because they did not know what to do otherwise. Those people who overworked themselves lost the forest and live on sands now. Those people who were too smart for their own good could only talk in a language that nobody else understood. Those people who behaved too well could not defy the laws that were continuously made and lived surrounded by tens and thousands of laws. Fool's Accord. This is a story about a sad prince. A story from a long time ago. A dark force attacked his kingdom. In a single night, an army of red-eyed monsters decimated it, along with enough black dragons to cover up the sky. It's been said that the king and queen were disemboweled in the royal city under the claws of the black dragon, and the entire place was a sea of blood. The prince and his sister were able to escape, but the prince vowed to become a demon of vengeance after witnessing the disaster. This is the story of a frightening prince, a history of a war from very long ago. A cruel and murderous prince indulged himself in the violence of vengeance. He killed all fleeing enemies as if it was a matter of course. Some people have even seen the prince slash the enemies' bodies multiple times. Not even the commander could hold him back, as the prince threw himself into the cruel battlefields. This is the story about an unfortunate prince. A story about a rocky and unfortunate path of fate. The next battlefield was where a goddess was to be protected. The prince slashed at the enemy, cut off their limbs, opened up their bowels, cut off their heads, and gouged out their eyes. He couldn't even tell if the blood on him was his or the enemy's. The heavily wounded prince fell at last. The prince experienced excruciating pain as he lay in a puddle of blood. He looked up with blurry eyes and saw the shape of a cursed dragon. This is the story of a mad prince. A story from long ago about an encounter with a dragon. In front of the prince was a heavily injured red dragon. The prince wished to kill it. Even though the dragon wasn't black in color, their species was still responsible for his parents' death. The dragon spoke as the prince raised his sword.
I will let you live. We will exchange our souls, and I will give you power.
The prince thought about it long and hard, and decided to enter into a pact with the dragon. It didn't matter what he'd lose. It didn't matter if it is a dragon. Nothing else mattered, as long as he could wield his blade of vengeance. The only thing in the prince's heart was a pitch black desire.